What is a good Fire Emblem to start with? I think some popular starting points are Fire Emblem 8, The Sacred Stones. It's available on the NSO if you have a Switch NSO. Three Houses is a popular one. It's pretty different from the rest of the series, but it's a good starting point.
If I don't finish my assigned
as far as like stories and character and stuff goes, and that's on the Switch.
Get it? Missing? Mission?
Path of Radiance also gets recommended a lot. I've got issues with the game. I think it's pretty slow from a gameplay perspective. But being one of the easier games, it's definitely a helpful starting point. Fire Emblem 3, if you know enough to, like, apply a translation patch, could be a good starting point. Again, it's pretty easy, and it doesn't have the jank that the NES one has, although it is still pretty old. And then 7 is one that a lot of people like. I really don't like 7, but that's one that a lot of people will recommend as a starting point as well. It tends to be on the easier end, although not as easy as Fire Emblem 8, Sacred Stones, and Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance. But the same general idea of, like, it's more simplistic. Oh yeah, Awakening! Why didn't I think of Awakening? Awakening is a really good starting point. Awakening, so one of the things I like about Awakening as a starting point is Normal, Hard, and Lunatic are all very different from each other in terms of difficulty. Normal is incredibly easy, highly tutorializes stuff. It doesn't give you access to all of the mechanics until like chapter 4, and because it slowly drip feeds them to you. Hard is more difficult, but not like the most grueling experience ever. You do instantly get access to every mechanic, but it does still tutorialize them if you need the tutorial. You're not locked out in the way that you would be earlier. And then Lunatic mode is legitimately one of the most challenging difficulties, and Lunatic Plus, which is its like sort of New Game Plus exclusive thing, are legitimately some of the hardest difficulties that Fire Emblem has to offer. And I think provide a really, really good challenge for entrenched players. And so I think that Awakening is probably the best place to start the series at. It is available on the 3DS. Unfortunately, the fact there's no eShop means that you're probably going to have to find it used somewhere. And it's hard to find used games. I know eBay often has them, but there's an eBay boycott going on right now, so I can't in good conscience recommend, like, buying it from there. GameStop, maybe? I don't really know if they carry it or not. And then, of course, there's Sailing the Seven Seas, which I can't endorse, because I don't want to go to prison. But, if you can find Fire Emblem Awakening, it is, I think it is probably the best starting point for the series. It's not my favorite game, but I do think it's probably the best starting point. If you can't find Fire Emblem Awakening, I would say Sacred Stones is probably the next best one, because it's available on the NSO, and it's very easy. Even hard mode is very easy, but normal and easy. Easy has, like, a very, very strict tutorial. I would say also, at the very least, like, consider playing on easy for some of these titles because they tutorialize things very well. The reason I don't like FE7, I mean, there's a lot of these reasons I don't like FE7, but as a new player game, I think that the way that it tutorializes is a little bit... I don't like the way that it tutorializes. It tends to focus on things that I don't think are as important. But that would probably be the next one down, I would say. If you can't find 8, then 7, which it doesn't have a subtitle in non-Japanese because it was just called Fire Emblem. It's got Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector. That's how you can recognize it. Its official subtitle is the Blazing Blade or the Blazing Sword, but that's only in the Japanese version. I've Sacred Stones on the Wii U. I would say start on that one, especially if you don't own Awakening, just because you don't have to buy something. And Sacred Stones is an easy enough game that I don't think hard is, like, the worst starting point. But if you want to, the only difference between easy and normal is easy has tutorials and normal does not. once you leave the tutorials, easy and normal are identical to each other. So if you're considering not playing on hard, I would say go to easy, because easy tutorializes stuff. It does a little bit handholdy, but it's not to the extent that, like, I find annoying for new play. It does things like, you know, here's a unit who gets injured on his own, like he controls himself and gets injured for his first move, and that's to teach you about healing. It teaches you how to heal him. Whereas if you were to play without the tutorials, he wouldn't be injured, right? And stuff like that. Gilliam, I'm talking about Gilliam in chapter 1, who, like, attacks a soldier and gets chunked for, like, a third of his health. And then he's like, oh no, I need a heal! And then it tutorializes how to heal him with vulneraries and stuff. But yeah, I would say Awakening and Sacred Stones are good starting points. Oh, you own Awakening. I would recommend Awakening over Sacred Stones. Again, I would play on or I guess it's called Normal, because it's Normal, Hard, Lunatic. I would play on Normal if you do Awakening. If you do Sacred Stones, I would choose either easy or hard, depending on how you feel. But bear in mind that, like, there's not really a reason to play Normal, because Normal just doesn't have tutorials, but it's identical to easy otherwise. And yeah, I think those would be my starting point recommendations. Path of Radiance is also pretty good at tutorializing things. I think Path of Radiance probably has the best tutorials in the series. Just if you had to ask me offhand, that's probably what I would say. But the problem with it is it's very slow, and it's very hard to get a hold of right now. Path of Radiance on the Switch 2, it's not even confirmed for it. A lot of people think it's confirmed for it because it showed up in the Switch 2 Direct. But there was actually text on screen that said, not all of these titles, or like, these titles are subject to change or something like that. Basically, they were using GameCube games, like the pictures of GameCube games, as placeholder for the background, but those were not confirmed games. The only confirmed games were the ones that got explicit, like, dates listed. It listed like 3 or 4 GameCube games and gave them, like, this is the date they'll be out, and then it showed a bunch of other GameCube games, like the box arts, and it said, like, and others coming soon, and there was text on screen that said, you know, like, subject to change which games get added. And I think it's very likely Path of Radiance gets added, but I do want to be clear, like, it's not technically confirmed, so I don't want to get anyone's, like, you know, false hope or whatever up. But if it is added, then I think that would be my recommend, just because then it finally fucking becomes accessible. Even though it's a game I have a lot of issues with, both from a story and gameplay perspective, I think it's a very good jumping on point. The first 8 chapters of the game are a very good tutorial. It's very easy. And even though it's slow, if you're turned off of the series because it's slow... Oh, I gotta turn auto advance off. That was the other thing I hated, is when it's not voiced, it still auto advances. If you're turned off of the series because Path of Radiance is too slow, then I would say try a different game, because all of the other ones, aside from Radiant Dawn... No, even Radiant Dawn's faster, it's just not... It's still pretty slow. But if you're turned off because Path of Radiance is too slow, I'd say try another one. If you're turned off because it's too easy, I would also say try another one. Path of Radiance is, like, one of the easiest games in the franchise. I think Awakening is probably the best jumping on point, though. It's got a really good tutorial. Normal mode Awakening is easy enough for less experienced players. And crucially, Awakening has a lot of things like reclassing and the S supports and stuff, which are not present in the older games, but are present in the newer games and seem to be a mainstay going forward. And so I think starting with a game that has those reclassing features, has the focus on supports, has the grinding maps, has the stuff that's not in older Fire Emblems, would prepare you more for the games that are going to be coming out in the future, right? So even if, you know, Awakening isn't representative of the SNES and Game Boy Advance era, it is representative of modern Fire Emblem. And in a similar way Three Houses is. Like, Three Houses is pretty different, but, like, Engage is pretty different, right? Fates is pretty different. Like, all the modern games tend to be pretty different from each other. I've heard Awakening also is connected to Marth, which makes it historically significant. Yeah, so Awakening takes place on the same continent as Marth's adventures, but like 10,000 years in the future or something. And there is a character, there is a character that time travels, that presents themselves as Marth, but is wearing a mask, so like, are they Marth, are they not Marth, is like part of the mystery going forward. I'm not gonna spoil anything beyond that, but like, Marth is in the game to an extent, and Marth is, like, it's Marth's world. It's also, Fire Emblem Awakening is also full of references to the older games, which you probably won't, like, recognize a lot of the references, but there'll be random items that say things like Orson's Hatchet, or Celica's Wind Spell, or stuff, and they're, like, named after characters from previous games, and that's supposed to be, like, references backwards, which I think is cool. Reminds me of Tales of Basteria and Zarestia being in the same world but separated by 1,000 years or so. It's kind of cool to see how the setting is shaped different. It's not just Marth's world also, like, because Fire Emblem Gaiden and Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia take place in the continent of Valentia, and that is like the neighboring continent to Arcanea, which is Marth's world. So it incorporates both of them, because you journey between the two continents in Awakening. But yeah, Awakening, I think it's a really good jumping on point. I know a lot of people say that it's not, because it like sets up expectations that aren't in line with the older games, but I don't know, I think that it's better if you're trying to get into a series to get expectations that'll be set up for the new ones. Because you can always go backwards and play the old games and know that, like, going into them, like, okay, I've got my baseline Fire Emblem with Awakening. Now I'm gonna go back and play Fire Emblem 7 because I want to see what Eliwood's story is right? And now I adjust to the fact that there's no reclassing in 7, that there's no S supports in 7, that these things work differently. And I think that is a lot easier than playing something older and then suddenly the new Fire Emblem comes out and it's completely different. I don't know. That's just my take, though. Like, not everyone's going to agree. Awakening was basically the swan song for the series. It was going to end. Yeah, so it was supposed to be, or not necessarily supposed to be, but it was likely to be the last game in the series, because 11 and 12 performed very poorly. For a variety of reasons. And 9 and 10 also, like, everyone focuses on 11 and 12 performing poorly, but 9 and 10, they didn't perform as badly as 11 and 12. But they were, I would say that they were considered, like, not super successful. Especially 10. Because one of the things about 10 is, so Path of Radiance, Fire Emblem 9, is a mostly complete story with a couple of, like, dangling plot threads. And then Fire Emblem 10, Radiant Dawn, is a sequel, right? The problem is Path of Radiance was on the GameCube, and Radiant Dawn was on the Wii. And while very entrenched Nintendo fans probably had both consoles, not everyone did. And so Radiant Dawn being a direct sequel to a game that was on an older console, yes, it was backwards compatible, you can play GameCube games on the Wii, but I think even just that barrier of entry of it being a different console turned some people off. There was also a very big difficulty shift. Path of Radiance is one of the easiest games in the series. Radiant Dawn is one of the hardest. I don't think it's the hardest. I think Awakening is harder. I think 12 is harder. I think there's quite a few that are harder. But the fact that it jumped so drastically meant that someone who plays through hard mode, Path of Radiance, and then goes to Radiant Dawn, the sequel, they're like, I want to follow this story, and suddenly they're struggling to beat normal and easy mode. It could be a huge turnoff, like, what the fuck is this? It's a Kaizo game now. Not only that, but you start with a different set of characters, which I think is a really cool decision for a sequel, but a lot of people were like, Ike is my favorite character, why am I playing with, you know, these stupid Edward, Leonardo, Micaiah dinguses? And even when you do get, like, because there's a few characters that show up early on that are from Path of Radiance, like Soth and Ileana and Jill and Zehark, but they're, like, side characters. Aside from Jill, I don't think any of them would count as even, like, secondary characters So it feels kind of like, why do we have these guys, right? And personally, I really like that choice because it gives a different perspective. You're playing as the people who were the enemies in Path of Radiance. I thought that was so cool as a creative decision. Like, there's a lot of issues I have with Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance's story, but I think the idea of Dane is the evil nation in Path of Radiance, and then you boot up the sequel, and the very first thing you do is you are playing as Dane and seeing things from the citizens of Dane's perspective 3 years after they were defeated. That's really, really cool. And they didn't go as far as I would have liked with it. Like, they do some stupid stuff. The plot has, like, very stupid moments. But just the idea of, like, imagine if, you know, you finish the Sacred Stones, right? And part of the plot of the Sacred Stones, part of what kicks the whole demonic possession thing into motion is the prophecy that there's going to be an earthquake that destroys Grotto. Grotto's the evil nation. And they're doing this bad stuff because of a prophecy that's the earthquake's gonna destroy them. And in the epilogue of Sacred Stones, the earthquake happens. It does destroy Grotto. And the country is devastated. They're trying to recover. And that's after they lost a war against Renee. So they lost the war, their military is completely fucking destroyed, and then the earthquake happens, the citizenry gets destroyed. What if we had then a sequel to Sacred Stones where it starts out and you're playing as a band of people who are like in Grotto after this disaster, and you're like, holy shit, like Renee destroyed our country, we have to fight against the tyranny of the Renee people who've like now conquered us and made us a vassal state. I don't know. I wish that they had done something more with the Dawn Brigade than what they did. I assume you're familiar with the Officers Academy on the ground of the Gargmak Monastery. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I would kill for a Part 1 Radiant Dawn to be the entire Fire Emblem game. Yeah, I feel like Radiant Dawn, in a similar way to Three Houses, being like just too ambitious for its own good, I think Radiant Dawn, it tried to do two different things. It tried to do the whole you're playing as the villains of the previous game thing, and then it also tried to do the two perspectives thing, and I feel like it wasn't even two, it was like 3 perspectives, and I feel like they sort of were at odds with each other. It made it so that, like, you're inevitably going to gravitate towards, like, if the idea is showing you and getting you to bond with who used to be the villains, then halfway through the game, like, you jump over back to the people you used to play as. I don't know, it felt like it kind of undermined it. I think it can work. Like, I liked it in The Last of Us 2. I know, controversial game, but I liked The Last of Us 2, how you play through the first, like, half of the game as Ellie, and then it jumps to Abby, the person she's been hunting down trying to kill. I do think it fumbled the ending, because the whole, like, the epilogue with, like, the slavers and stuff was really dumb. But I liked the different perspectives, even if there's aspects of it that were kind of, like, like, the dog thing makes me roll my eyes. The dog, for anyone who isn't familiar, Last of Us 2 is like a deconstruction of a revenge story. And the idea is you're playing as the person getting revenge, but then later you play as the person being hunted down, and it sort of tries to humanize them. The dog thing felt very much like just too in your face, because at the end of Ellie's story, she just, like, kills a dog. And the game, like, focuses on, like, she killed this dog. She's so evil. But there've been dog enemies all game long, and you've killed, like, thousands of dogs by then. Probably not thousands, but, like, dozens at least of dogs by then. So what makes this dog so special? Well, when you play as Abby, Abby pets the dog, and that makes her human. And I was just like, you didn't need this. I feel like the story you're trying to tell about, like, revenge, dig 2 graves gets weaker when you go, like, in your face about one specific dog. And then there's also, like, it's like a weird thing where, like, I think she shoots someone in the stomach, and then afterwards she realizes the person she shot was pregnant, and that fucking breaks her. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you've done the equivalent of like a mass murder, but killing a pregnant person is too much for you. You've killed a lot of assigned female at birth people in this campaign. You've probably killed more than one pregnant person. You can't always tell when someone's pregnant just from looking at them. I thought the game did a good job of showing everyone had a perspective. Everyone in The Last of Us 2 had life. Even random enemies cry for their loved ones. I liked that aspect. I did really like... I like the game. I've got issues with it, especially its creator seeming to, like, not really understand its message based on his real-life politics. But I did really like the game. It's uneven at times. Again, I really don't like the ending where you go on, like, a 3-hour-long epilogue fighting slavers. That felt very unnecessary. I felt like the conclusion before that was much stronger. I feel like maybe even if they had, like, Ellie can't give up the quest and she leaves, and that's when she loses Dina. Because if you want to make her lose her girlfriend, like, then that's, you know, I get it. It's one of those, like, you lose every aspect of your humanity hunting this revenge. It's too late. But I just feel like the gameplay section fighting against those enemies was, like, pretty weak and dragged out.